3 sharp knocks rattled my cabin door, and by the time I cracked it open, I was staring at a man with a crooked plastic badge clipped to his shirt. He barked something about HOA enforcement, but he had no clue whose porch he'd stepped onto. I let him see the steel at my hip, the real badge on my belt, and I told him calm as Sunday retired State Police Commander Dan Mallister. His face went white and he bolted into the dark like a kid caught stealing. What he didn't know was that running only confirmed one thing for me: this wasn't some prank. This was the beginning of a war. I didn't move to Pine Valley, Montana for drama. I came here for peace. After my wife Lisa lost her fight with cancer, I couldn't breathe in the city anymore. Every corner reminded me of her. Every diner booth felt empty. So I sold everything, loaded up my old truck, and drove north until I found 40 acres of ridgelines and pine where nobody could tell me what to do. No HOA, no nosy neighbors, just sky silence and my Hound Ranger. That's what I bought freedom. But then the first letter showed up tacked to my gate in sloppy red ink: HOA notice. Unauthorized construction. Cease immediately or face consequences. I laughed when I read it out loud standing there on my gravel drive. There was no HOA out here. That was the whole point of this land. But when I showed the note to Bill at the bait shop, a Vietnam vet with more scars than patience, he didn't laugh. He tapped ash into a rusty can and told me straight, "That's Cedar Creek Estates. They think they own the county." I brushed it off at least until the day I hiked back to find yellow tape wrapped around the shed foundation I'd poured myself. Black marker scrawled, HOA enforcement, do not enter. Sloppy handwriting, cheap tape from a hardware store, but the message landed. Someone had crossed my line, literally. When Sheriff Caldwell, an old academy buddy, came out, he shook his head and said, "Most folks cave before it gets ugly." Ugly came fast. My power was cut off by a forged disconnect order with my name signed at the bottom. Then came the fake cop at my door, the cheap radio on his belt, the empty holster. And later that night, when Ranger bristled at the window, I saw a second figure hiding in the tree line watching. I locked my door, sat in the dark with a shotgun across my lap, and asked myself if I'd made a mistake buying this land. Was I just a fool chasing peace where peace didn't exist? Days blurred with harassment. More tape, more notes. Strange SUVs idling at the edge of my property. One night, I found a motion-activated camera strapped to a tree pointed straight at my cabin window. That was when doubt hit hardest. I poured black coffee, sat staring into the tree line, and thought about Lisa. She used to tell me I couldn't save everyone, couldn't fight every battle. Maybe she was right. Maybe I should have walked away. For the first time in my life, I felt powerless, like no matter how many years I wore a badge, these cowards were going to bleed me dry with lies and intimidation. But then I remembered her other words, the ones she said when the doctors gave her months to live. You don't get to quit just because it's hard. That stuck. And when I saw my shed wrapped in tape again, when I found the generator wires half severed, I felt something shift. No more waiting. No more hoping they'd leave me alone. They picked the wrong man to corner. I set up my own perimeter trail cams, motion lights, sensors buried beneath the soil like mines. The first night, the alarms buzzed, 3 figures slipped onto my land. 2 by the shed, 1 crouched at the generator. They moved with purpose, gloves on, tools ready. Not kids, not pranksters trained. I stepped onto the porch, rifle, raised my voice, slicing the night hands where I can see them. 1 bolted, another charged at me with a wrench, but when I fired 1 shot into the sky, the sound rolled through the valley like thunder. They ran, and I was left with a cut generator and a steel wrench dropped in the dirt. That's when it hit me. This wasn't harassment anymore. This was organized. The next morning, I drove straight to Cedar Creek. Gated community fountains spraying like they were in Las Vegas, manicured lawns lined up like soldiers. At the top of the hill stood Walter Pierce's slick suit white hair, combed back, smile like a shark. He welcomed me with fake charm, but when I laid out the evidence, fake cops, forged papers trespassing his smile, sharpened into something colder. You may have been a commander once, he said, but here I have more power than you think. I leaned in close enough to smell the cologne on his collar. Then let's test that theory. His eyes flickered just once, but it was enough. He was bluffing, and I'd called it. Still, it got worse. One night, my shed exploded in flames. Weeks of work gone in a fireball that lit the pines. Ranger barked until his throat cracked, and I stood in the blaze's glow thinking, maybe this is it. Maybe they've beaten me. But when Sheriff Caldwell rolled up and saw the smoldering wreck, he said, "They've gone too far." And he was right. If they wanted war, they'd just declared it. That's when the cracks in their armor showed. One of their hired thugs stumbled onto my land bloody and desperate, begging me not to turn him in. Said he was just a runner, that Pierce wasn't the mastermind, just the face. He whispered that the HOA was a front money-laundering land grabs scare tactics to push families out so developers could swallow the county. Then he showed me a buried box, bundles of cash, forged permits, and a typed list of names. Mine was there slashed in red with one word, remove. I hauled him to Caldwell, and when we opened the flash drive tucked inside that box, we found blueprints for an expansion that would swallow miles of land, even mine. Notes about bribed judges, fake zoning ordinances, officials on payroll. And then the final gut punch. Judge Henry Barrett, a man I'd trusted, a man who'd spoken at Lisa's funeral, had his name signed across fraudulent approvals. I tracked him to a hidden bunker in the woods, a war room plastered with maps and photos of landowners marked "Buy, Push, Threat, Remove." My face dead center, and when I turned, I found Barrett aiming a silenced pistol at my chest. His voice was steady, almost bored. "You should have stayed in the city." Ranger growled low, and I knew this could end one of two ways, me on the floor or him. I palmed a flare, struck it against the wall, white light filling the bunker. Ranger lunged, Barrett fired wild, and I tackled him hard, pinning him until Caldwell's men stormed in. But even with Barrett cuffed, the real monster revealed himself. A face flickered on the bunker monitors, Leonard Voss. Silver-beard glasses, calm as ice. He told me Pierce was a puppet Barrett the salesman, but he was the architect. And he bragged about doing this in 4 other states, folding entire towns into HOA kingdoms. "You think this ends with Pierce," he said. "You've already lost." He was wrong. Days later, federal agents and Caldwell's deputies hit a private airfield outside Cedar Creek. Gunfire cracked through the trees as we advanced. I saw Voss shouting orders, trying to climb into a truck. I charged, slammed him into the gravel, and pressed my knee to his chest. His lip bled as I snarled, "You burned my land, sent killers to my door, murdered men like Ethan Blake." Why, he sneered up at me with dead eyes and said, "Because I could," but that was the last order he gave. Sirens wailed, agents swarmed, and the whole rotten network fell in chains. Judges, contractors, developers, all of them dragged into daylight. For the first time since Lisa died, I felt the weight of justice, not peace, not relief, but justice. And if there's one thing I learned from the war Cedar Creek brought to my door, it's this: never let bullies in suits decide the limits of your freedom.